Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome, 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 welcome. And I've got Rox back here with me. Yay! So,
Hello.
let me know about the volume, first of all. Rox, say hello so people can hear you talk so we can double check, make sure we're not having
All
sound
right.
issues.
Hello from Minneapolis
What's the
to the
weather
world.
there?
Today I had to close my windows for this. It couldn't be more perfect. Very nice and dry and 77 degrees.
Here,
Beautiful.
today, right now it's 99. It's only supposed to be 105 today. Tomorrow it's supposed to be 109. And we still have the smoky air. We have bad air from the fires in California still. So everybody, Ruth says that the volume is fine, sound is good. Okay, so we'll carry on then. Yay!
All
I
right.
had Rox on here a couple months ago, and we both had so much fun. Prior to that, we'd only met in person one time, but we are very familiar with each other through the Master Hand Knitting Program and have corresponded back and forth through Ravelry um, and such. And you all know that she has wonderful, wonderful, wonderful YouTube videos that she puts up twice a week. And we were just talking a few minutes ago when we're getting ready that both of us are very, very good at technical knitting. We both really enjoy the technical aspects of knitting and the history and all that came before and all that. But we're completely different personality wise. And you'll see that because what we're going to do is we're going to share how do we make YouTube videos. We're going to share how she does it and how I do it. And we've never shared with each other before how we do it. So this is a first. And it's really fun to see the differences in our personality, in our setups. Our output is very similar. We both do, I think, very good quality videos. But how we get to that point is very, very different. So
Yeah.
welcome back, Rox.
Sorry.
I said, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited. It's a lot of fun to see your setup and versus mine. I'm a little envious of yours, actually, now that I see the difference. But
Well, I'm envious of yours. So let's start back at the beginning. What made you think to make a YouTube video to start out with? The very first video you made, what led up to you making that video?
Um, the first videos, well, I joined YouTube not to do knitting videos. I joined YouTube because I had a daughter in figure skating and all of our relatives were out of town or out of state. And so I was sharing videos. And then I started sharing knitting related videos. Like if I went to a knitting event, I might post that. But I think it was 2009, between 2009 and 2012 is when I kind of had my first sort of wave of videos. And part of that was I started teaching at my local yarn shop. And so I created some little reference videos for my students. Like if I was teaching a raglan sweater and they were going to have to divide for the sleeves in the middle of the week, I knew they wouldn't remember when they got back. And so I created those. And then I had a column that I wrote on Ravelry. They had a newsletter called This Week in Ravelry, and I had a weekly, or however often it was published, column. And so I would do a lot of up close photos, but I sometimes would do videos for that. And at the same time, I was trying to explore how to, we didn't call it podcasting at that point. They were calling it vlogging. And so there were some people who were doing vlogs and that I thought was interesting. And I was trying to figure out how could I do that with knitting? And I tried a few things, and the setup that I had was not ideal for that. And that just didn't work out well. So I probably did like 30 videos in that 3-year time period. And then for the next 5 years, I might have put one video a year or every 2 years. And in my mind, I thought if I was going to post a video just on my own, it was going to be because it was something really unusual or different. So I thought, well, everybody's putting out videos on how to cast on or do this or that. What would be the point of me doing that? And not realizing that everybody has their own take on it and whatever. But this was also kind of early years of YouTube. So so I just kind of did it really sporadically, and that was how I got started with it. So
let me
it
tell
was,
how I got started, and then we'll kind of go back and forth.
yeah.
Okay. So I got started the very first. I had no intention of making YouTube videos. I didn't even watch YouTube. YouTube was nothing in my life. But I wrote an article for Cast On magazine about brioche knitting. And in that article, I discussed the Italian cast on. And I found it extraordinarily difficult to describe it with words only.
Yeah.
So that someone could actually do it. So I asked Dorinda, I said, can I make a video to go with this? And I think I'm actually the first person that made a video to go with an article that was in Cast On magazine. And she said, sure. So I made a video that shows the Italian cast on for double knitting, and you can use it for brioche or whatever, but it was specific to that article, it was for double knitting. And I didn't make another video for a long time also because it was a one-time deal, you know. And,
Yeah.
But then I don't really remember. I think that when I really got into making a lot of videos was when I started teaching locally, like you at our junior college. I taught knitting classes at the junior college, and I made the videos for the students to go along with the lessons, so that I told them, you know, you're not going to remember everything I tell you in class today, so I've made a video for you, you know.
Yeah.
And it's exactly as I taught it in class, so you won't, you know,
Yeah.
and it was skills that other people have taught over and over and over, but I wanted them to see it the way I taught it because that's how I did in class.
Right.
And that's when I first started getting a really pretty positive response on YouTube, realizing other people like to watch them too, because I'd initially made them just for my students. So I'm going to tell first how I did my first setup, and then we'll go to you and we'll go back and forth like that, okay?
Okay.
So when I first started making YouTube videos, I made them very similar how I make them now as far as filming. And I used a room in my house that was where my desk was. And my desktop was black. So I just used the desktop as the background. I think that very first video I used a manila folder as the background. Yeah, I used a manila folder. And I use a C-clamp, a double-ended C-clamp. This is it. And I had this for some other purpose, but I figured out I could clamp it to my desk at one end and clamp my phone to it at the other end. And I put my phone between my eyes and my hands and literally watched myself knit through my phone and filmed it. And this way, it's exactly how I still do it. But my setup is different. So my phone is here and I'm knitting and I can reach up and change and focus just like this.
What year did you start doing that? Like, because I'm thinking about what my phone was like back then, and I don't think I could have done that. It was one of the
original iPhones. I had the very first iPhone, but I don't remember what year it was, but I'd have to go to my YouTube channel and look. But I've never used anything but my phone. I've never used a camera because I don't even own a camera. I just have my So I'm literally looking. The phone is between my eyeballs and my knitting. So that's why my videos look like you're looking directly at your hands, because it is in the line of sight between my eyes and my knitting. And whoops, I went out of focus because I've been over. Let me get back in focus here. So I used my desktop. I used that manila folder, and then I used my desktop with the black surface. I did not have any special lighting, so I could only make videos when the lighting was good at that window. And it couldn't be too bright or not bright enough. And in order to diffuse it, I hung a white pillowcase over my window to diffuse the light. So I could only make videos at a very specific time of the day. And 9 times out of 10, something else was happening. Like I had some new windows put in my house. Of course, that's when the workers are there going bang, 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 you know. And so I couldn't record at that time. So, and I did that for quite some time. I just moved to my library. I don't know why I'm fuzzy, because I was going bang, bang, bang. I moved to this room recently. So that was how I started doing videos. So Rox, what was your setup in the beginning?
In the beginning, when I filmed videos, it was usually in our kitchen. So I live in Minnesota, which is pretty far north, which means in the wintertime, there are very few daylight hours. And our kitchen has southern facing, so there at least you could get some light in there. So I would, I don't think I had a phone. I didn't have an iPhone for a number of years. I think I didn't get one till later, so I probably had some other kind of phone. But we had kids, and so we had like a pocket-sized digital camera, and it was a pretty good one. So, and we had tripods because my husband has been interested in photography and video and audio and all that since he was young. So we had a tripod. So I would hook up the tripod on the camera, and I would basically do what you were doing. I would have the camera in between me and my knitting, but it was on a tripod, which meant I was straddling the tripod and reaching way around in front. So I was knitting in a very kind of unnatural position. And the problem was that I don't think I'd quite transferred over to continental knitting totally. And my English style is with long needles that are anchored. So it could be a real challenge to do that. Sometimes I would do them up in this office I have now. This became my knitting room at some point. But usually I was straddling around this tripod in those early years. And I was using the free editing software that was on my Windows PC. Then it would crash, and it was very frustrating. So, and things were really limited then too in terms of the resolution of the images, and also like the file, like how many minutes long the video could be, that was limited. And then you were limited by, your upload speed, all of that stuff. It was, so those early videos are like 4 or 5 minutes long because they tend to be a very simple technique or concept, but also I was just limited by how big of a video.
By YouTube, limited by YouTube, because the same with me. And so I had no editing software whatsoever, none. And what I would do is if I had a blooper, I would just start over. Or if somebody walked in the room or my dogs barked or whatever, I would just start over until I could go all the way through it without making a mistake. And so sometimes it would take, and some days you're just off. Some days the right words will not come out of your mouth. You say left instead of right and knit instead of purl, and you don't realize you're saying it till you watch the video, the replay, and you go, oh my God.
You say yarn instead of needle, or
yes. But when you're saying it, it makes perfect sense. But when you watch the replay, you're going, uh-oh. And so I would have to start all over again. And then YouTube, like Rox was saying, they had a maximum amount that you could upload. I think it was 12 minutes.
Something like that, yeah.
It was short. So until you become known to them or whatever.
Yeah, they had some kind of limit for subscribers or view counts or, something like that.
And, and then on top of that, okay, so we start out being knitters, right? They just want to share with people. That's all we want to do is share.
Yeah.
And but then you have to learn YouTube, the backside of YouTube, and about, I didn't know anything about putting tags on or any of that stuff. So I just made my videos. I'm just merrily going along, and then people would ask me, well, do you do this? Do you do that? No, I don't know anything about that.
I know, and then the whole thing with then they came out with thumbnails because it used to be you didn't have thumbnails, and like, oh, you're never going to get any views if you don't have thumbnails. And let me tell you, I have a couple of videos that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, and they continue to get them, and there's no thumbnail.
Right, right. And then, or they want you to have end screens and have sharing your videos, you know, adding, what do they call that, where you add your other videos in the corner? It's slipping
Oh, the
my
end
mind.
screen,
Yeah,
the end
end
screen
screens and the, so, you
in the
know,
car.
and then this is bringing forward, we'll go back still some more. But recently, YouTube, you know, they make these changes and they just apply it to you and all of your videos. Like
Yeah.
recently they decided they need to have mid-roll advertisements. Oh my God. I have like almost 400 videos on my main YouTube channel. And now, you know, and I really don't like mid-screen ads, mid-roll.
Yeah.
So I have to go back and edit them because they went back and applied them to all of your previous videos that were over a certain length of time.
I happened to see somebody tweet about that a few weeks ahead of time. And even though I had opted out of mid-roll videos, mid-roll ads before that, if you did something in your analytics thing before a particular date, you could then make sure they weren't going to add mid-roll ads in. But I wouldn't have known to do that if I hadn't seen
Well, I
somebody
didn't
tweet
know to do
about
that.
it.
So I have, you know, and so I'm just slowly doing that, you know, and it's a process. It's really an annoying process, really annoying. And YouTube, and then like on my live stream interviews like this, you know, the chat should be recorded and show play back. And on most of them it does, but a couple of them it doesn't. And why? I don't know. I don't know why, you know. And someone will say, I can't see the chat, as if it's my fault. They can't see
Yeah.
the chat. I have no control over that, you know. So anyway, the next thing, so you talked about your beginning. The next thing, I decided that I wanted to actually invest some of my time in my channel. You know, start marketing, not paying ads and stuff, but actually thinking about what I was going to do and have a plan. Because before that, it was just haphazard. It was just whatever I felt like doing. Pretty much
Yeah.
whatever I feel like doing too. But I have a bigger plan. And that is when I started my Facebook group and my Ravelry group. And I really didn't want to do that, but people would ask me, Suzanne, you should start a group. You should start a group. And so I finally did, and I'm glad I did. I'm really glad I did. But it does create more responsibility, and
Yeah.
it makes me feel like if I take time off, then I'm responsible to let people know why I'm taking some time off. You know, that I'm going to take a break. I need a break, you know. So
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm taking a break from it for a while. And there are times when you feel like going gung ho, you know, and it's exciting, and you've got a list of things you want to do. I have a spreadsheet of all the videos that I want to make, and I put them in an order, you know, just a to-do list. But there are other times when I don't really feel like doing it, you know.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so anyway, so I moved when I was saying, okay, I'm going to actually focus on this. We redid the room that I'm in right now, and I'm going to show you the room. This is a green screen right here. I'm going to drop my green screen. So I moved into this room. Look
Now
at
you're
me.
sure?
Look at me. I'm invisible.
It's
So
funny. There you go.
this is my library. And the window here is facing the north, so I get really good lighting. I do have lighting now, which you can see. These glasses don't have an anti-reflective coating, and I'll show you that lighting in a bit. We'll do that. But I can turn the lighting off and on with my phone. So I'm going to turn it off. So this is with no extra lighting, and now the reflection you're seeing in my glasses is actually the window that's in front of me. So I do like the lighting. I like the lighting. And they're placed up high, so they're not directly on my face. So let me take my green screen. And so I didn't get a green screen till this year, but I did move to this room and I still didn't have any lighting, but I'm getting the northern light. And so about that time, I decided to make myself a light box. And so I'm going to show you my light box. It's really sophisticated. This is my light box. That's the top. That's one side. That's interfacing. That fabric is interfacing. And this is just poster board. This is the top, and this is the cutout. This is where I put my clamp for my phone, holds it right here. That's about the vision. And so I use this with two very rustic lights, which I'll show you. Let me show you a picture of it. That was my next step, okay? So let me share you. Let me get my...
When did you start? When did you decide to do that? Do you know what year that was?
I don't. I've been using it for not very long ago. It's probably 3 years ago. Because that's when I made my groups. It was 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. It was this time of year.
Okay.
3 years ago, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Time flies. So I'm going to share with you how I use that light box. This is the light box sitting on my desk, and I am sitting right here in front of this desk at this moment. Here is my computer that I'm looking into right now. So this is my clamp with my phone, and I'll show you this is my, can you see the little speaker on my phone?
The microphone?
Yeah, that little ball that's sitting on my phone. I'll show that to you in a minute. And then see the light bulb, the light to the right of the shadow box, and another light over to the left. Those are just, Home Depot clamp-on lights with LED lights in them. And then I have another one that shines down from the top. So that is my very, very sophisticated light box. And I'll show you I use this as my speaker. It's made by Shure. This comes off. It just keeps, breath noise. It breath noise. It's directional. You can move it around, but it plugs right into my phone like this. So that's another thing. You got to make sure your phone's charged up.
Yep.
So, it's just a little detail, but I have had it go dead in the middle of making a video because I didn't charge it up. So we'll go to the next step with Rox. How did you evolve? And do you want to go to or not?
Do I want to what?
Go to your pictures or not?
Yeah, why don't you go? I think I numbered them and I wrote down them on the piece of paper so I know what I'm talking about. So the first one is my light box. This is from overhead. So when I'm doing my technique videos, I have a table, like one of those little buffet tables that you get at Costco, and it can go up and down different levels. And because I need it at a kind of a lower level than I'd want a regular table. And I experimented with different surfaces, but I've always gone with a light gray. And this right here is a couple of yards of polar fleece on top of that table. And then you see I have a tripod set up that has a camera directly overhead, but because of the way it plugs into the tripod, I can't see what I'm doing. So I have a little monitor strapped to that tripod. It's more like a unipod, or I don't know what it's called. It might be a microphone stand for all I know. But I have to have the monitor strapped upside down in order for me to see what I'm doing. So I am often looking at the monitor while I'm knitting to make sure I'm in frame, and then I can just reach right above my head and zoom in or zoom out if I need to. On the left, you can just see there's kind of I can't remember the name of this kind of a barn door or something kind of lighting thing my husband bought for me because he loves the whole lighting and video or audio type of stuff. So he set that up for me. And on the right-hand side, I think I just had like a shop light or something so that, and then overhead in the basement ceiling, I live in the Midwest, so everybody has like an unfinished basement in their house. That's why it's concrete floors. But right above my head is an LED light shop. So I have light from above and light from the sides. And in addition, I have some microphone, this kind of, I use a mic system that you'll see in a later picture. So if you want to do the next picture. So this is when I'm doing my technique videos, I have at the very beginning of the video and the very end of the video, I will have what I call face to the camera. And I'm standing in front of that bookcase there. And in this, off to the right, there's a black stand that's holding like an LED spotlight type of thing. This, the tripod in the foreground that has, you see that black cloth, that I have that raised up really high and the camera is mounted underneath there. And that's actually a teleprompter. If you go to the next picture, so you can see it from the other direction. I have an iPad sitting on this flat stand and it gets reflected on this glass that's in front of the camera lens, and then I can read what I'm going to say, because what I used to do is write it up on pieces of paper and then stand there and try to remember what I was going to say, and then I would forget what I was going to say, and I was standing there, it was like I could see myself thinking, like trying to remember what I was going to say. And so I got this, it was very inexpensive, this little teleprompter system. I just use an app on a very, very old iPad. It's the only thing I use the iPad for, is a hand-me-down iPad. And then on that little table, that's what's called this Rodecaster. That's what I have my microphone receiver plugged into. And then on the front of the table, there's a little black microphone transmitter that I clip to my belt, and then there's a wire that with the lavalier mic that I usually put up here on my shirt. And so that lets me check my sound levels and and I record my sound. So I'm recording sound both on the camera and on this Rodecaster. And then when I am editing, I synchronize them and I remove the camera audio. When I'm doing the technique overhead stuff, my face is close enough to the camera that the sound is okay. But when the camera is several feet away from me in my office with all those hard surfaces, it gets kind of echoey. And so this way I can just kind of maintain the same level of sound through the entire video. So then also you'll see there's like this cube that has a light in it. Again, there's just another shop light in there, and that's kind of a soft box. It's sort of like the same thing that Suzanne made in order to do her videos, only it's meant for like taking photos inside of, only I just put it around that light to give me some more light. So that's this, and then you can see on the little desk I have another monitor there so that I can tell if I'm in frame. A lot of time if I get my if I don't have my tripod up high enough, I can, I might be cutting off my head, so I can kind of tell how that's framed.
Now,
and so
down and put it up every time?
Sorry?
Do you take this setup down and put it up every time, or do you just leave it in position like this?
Oh, I can't leave it in position. The table stays there all the time. I have a video, a picture at the end that you'll see how I'll show you what it looks like when everything's set up. If you go to the next picture, I think is just an up close. Oh, that's the teleprompter. So you can see the iPad is sitting flat, but it gets reflected up, and you can't see that in the video. I just can read it, directly off of there. So we go to the next picture. So this is that thing that's recording my sound here. It's meant for doing podcasting, and you could have several people calling in and doing a recording, all that, and have sound effects. It's way overkill for what I needed. But there wasn't anything that I did need that was better, especially when you have a husband who's an audio freak. So that was the thing I got. So then when I'm doing my Casual Friday podcasts, I don't have the teleprompter. I have the tripod in the same place. You can go to the next picture. But I have a chair and I'm seated. So instead of standing in front of it like I do when I'm doing my technique videos, I'm seated. And then I've got one more picture. The next one. Oh, I thought I had one other one before that. This red carpet right here, that's my live stream setup. So this is what I'm facing right now. That's my computer. And there's a little, looks like a lamp arm clamped to the desk. That's holding a Logitech camera so that I can switch between face to the camera in a live stream. And if somebody asks me a question, I want to demonstrate it, then I could switch to that camera. And I have that little like puzzle piece blocking pad there as the background because my desk is red and shiny. And so that helps for that. So then, and you can see I've moved the light box to be right next to my desk to help fill in with light. I have that to my right now. And to the left, I have my regular art light that I use when I knit, but I turn it so that light is shining at me when I'm filming. So then that last photo, the very last photo.
This one?
This one. So nope, that one. So that red carpet is 5 feet by 8 feet. So that's the entire floor space that I have for walking around in my office. So that I can't leave that tripod. My desk chair is pushed in there, and there's no way I could have the tripod set up. So I have to take the light stand and the tripod down every time. I usually fold up the chair and put it out in the hallway because I can't get at my shelves otherwise. So, but I do leave that table there just because it's heavy and it would be a pain to get it set up in the right spot every time. So you can see my setup is way more elaborate than yours, and yet my videos aren't really.
Well, that's what's so fun is to compare, because it's our personalities. It's just how you do things, and how I do things. It's whatever it is that appeals to you and the tools that you use. You know what I mean?
Well, and also the spouse, like I said, my husband has been an audio and video and photography person. So he had a lot of like the light stands and all that kind of the original microphone I used, he had that. And so when I started doing weekly technique videos, I started in February of 2017. So I decided I was going to do that at the end of 2016 because the yarn shop I taught closed. She retired, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And so we spent January kind of figuring out my first setup and how, because I said I can't straddle the tripod. But by then there were YouTube videos on how to shoot overhead video, which there wasn't when I originally did this. And so that's how I got the idea of the overhead upside down that you could then flip in your editing software. That had never occurred to me. So, because I kept trying to figure how could I do it over my shoulder, or how could I do it? And I didn't have an iPhone, and when I did have an iPhone, it didn't have enough room. I mean, because I never had in mind I need an iPhone to do video. So I always got the kind of the lowest end iPhone. So let me see. A couple of years ago, 6 years ago, I bought this camera right here, and they actually still make this. They have different models. It's a Sony RX100 and then two Roman numeral 2. They still make this model, but they have many other more models. So it does macro photography really well. So I really like it, and it's simple. So I have it set up, and I know what where the dial is to make things go closer or further away, and what button to push from behind to turn it into a movie. So the downside of this is there's a 20-minute limit, or 22 minutes, and then it will stop recording. So I had to learn, like with my podcasts, I used to just watch and wait for the 20 minutes. And now I'm like, oh, I have these different sections. I'm going to record each section
Right.
separately because I'm going to be putting a title screen in there anyway. And then it really helps me also kind of keep track of how much time I'm talking. And I kind of know how much is going to get edited out. And sometimes I'll go, oh, I don't need to do this other section. That's more than I really want to do this week, because every minute you have a video, that's at least 2 minutes of editing time.
And then
So
processing, and then
yeah,
uploading, and sometimes YouTube does not cooperate. You'll be uploading a video. You can upload a video, 15-minute video, and, it uploads and everything's fine. That might take, for me, it might take from a half an hour to an hour for it to upload, where I can start editing it on YouTube. But then there's other times when it gets stuck in the middle, half uploaded, and it just sits there forever and ever and ever. And then I don't know, should I upload it again? Or is it going
to? Are you uploading it because you use Final Cut Pro, right?
Right.
So we both. That's the one thing that we're both alike. We both use the same editing software. I used to export from Final Cut Pro directly to YouTube. So it was doing what they call transcoding and uploading, and it could take a couple of hours. And we finally, luckily, I have this husband he's technology guy, and we figured out how to export the video onto my local drive, which was much faster. And then I knew that it was the way it was correct. And then I
could also use Final Cut Pro again, because while it's uploading, you can't use Final Cut Pro if you're uploading from Final Cut Pro.
Right. So I export it and then I upload it, and the uploading just takes a couple minutes.
Okay, well, I'll have to try. That's good to know. So let me go back to what I do again. So let me get Rox out of the picture and put me in here. And I'll show the software that I'm using now too to do all that. So this is my setup. So I had that box on here on my desk before, which was my light box. This is my desk without the light box. And you can see those two lamps, one on either side. Those are made by Elgato. And that was my big expenditure this year. I got those two lamps in March, and I bought my green screen in March, and I also bought new software. But before I talk about this software, which is the Ecamm Live, I'm going to share with you the software that, let me get it on here, that we use for editing. And this is my most recent video that's on here, so you can see that this is called Final Cut Pro. Now, Final Cut Pro. Rox and I both have Macs, believe it or not. So, that was another thing we have in common. And we both use this software. Prior to this software, we used software that was called iMovie before Final Cut Pro came out.
Well, I used because I had a Windows machine. I used Windows Movie Maker or something.
And I use Movie because I've had a Mac for a long time. So, but this is called Final Cut Pro. And in this, I can move, let's see if it'll let me do this. See, so you can edit your video. You can edit the sound and the picture. You can create your thumbnails on here, or the preload, which is what I use for my thumbnail as well. You can adjust the color, the size, you can cut and paste. So this is cool, but again, it's a learning curve. All these things we're talking about, every single one of them has a learning curve. So not only do we have to keep our knowledge good about knitting, which I work on constantly, and I'm sure Rox does too, but we're trying to learn, how can we share it? What is the best way for us to share it, which also has learning curves. So I never edited my videos for a long time. And if they weren't good, I just started over again. When I learned how to start editing them, that was like a game changer for me, because then I knew if I have a blooper, I can just keep going and I can cut the blooper out. And that was like so awesome to be able to do that.
You don't realize also how many verbal sort of disfluencies you have until you listen to yourself, and the verbal tics that you have as well. The so it just because it's you thinking out loud,
and to try to get it to change those habits is really hard. It's like trying to knit a different way, because once you get into creating your video, you fall back into your comfort zone, into your knowledge area, and it just comes out of your mouth. I don't write down what I'm going to say in advance. It just comes out of my mouth. So
yeah.
and sometimes strange things come out.
Yeah, some people do these like voiceovers later, which I have never figured out the timing, like how people can time that. Like I use that teleprompter when I'm introducing a technical video and then finishing it, but I don't use that for anything else. And I try to have an outline for what I'm going to say to make sure that I stay to the talking points. But because I'm me and I can talk forever, my video, my technique videos, even if I think I went right through the whole thing, I'm going to cut out half of it, because I'm like, that is not, I do not need to say that. But I had to say that. I had to say it, but nobody else needs to hear it.
Right. But it was in the process, your thinking process and the flow that you were into. Exactly. Also, you were talking about, what you use for your surface. And I wanted to mention that too. I started out with the black desktop, and then you've got to think about what color yarn. And is it too bright? Does it reflect the light? Like white yarn in the black backdrop, you can see the stitch, but it's pretty bright,
Yeah.
And you want to be able to see the stitch detail, and you want your camera to be able to focus on it. So through the years, I've used a variety of backdrops and colors of yarn. I'm constantly working on the lighting, the mat that I use underneath my work, and my yarn choices.
Yeah.
And
I used to use, years ago, Plymouth had a yarn that was kind of variegated, and they had a few different colorways, and they had one that was like yellow and orange and blue and green. It was like, but mid-range colors. And I loved that yarn for doing demonstrations, because you could say the pink, like if you needed to refer to a stitch below, you could say the yellow stitch,
right.
So it was clear which one that you were talking about, and they discontinued it. So when I started in 2017, I was just buying any kind of worsted weight wool that I could find on sale, because I knew I was going to be using a lot of it. And then I realized quickly, if it has acrylic in it, it's going to shine. If it's a certain color, like I love red and I love fuchsia, they look terrible on camera. They're terrible.
Stitches, you can't see the stitches.
So let me just reach over here one second. Where is it? So this is I have the bin with my my swatching yarn right next to me. This is the color that I tend to use the most right now. It's this medium blue color. I probably would never knit anything from it. If you had blue eyes, you'd probably love this, but I don't have blue eyes, so it's not a color I wear. But it's just, yeah, I have a green that's a similar green, and I get kind of tired of it. I wish I could do something else, but
it's what shows up on camera.
Yeah, I know it's going to work, because sometimes I've used another color because maybe I was low on this or something.
One of my bags of swatches full.
Do you keep all of them? Sometimes I'm like, oh, do I care about this?
That's just one bag.
I throw so many swatches away. It depends on the kind of swatch it is. But I was cleaning off my desk today, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know what I was using this for, and I just threw
some, but some of them you can use, or use for demonstrations again.
Yeah. Sometimes if they're sizable enough and have something interesting on them, then I'll save them. But
yes. So let me show you, I'm going to show you my screen again. You're going to see my whole screen this time. Let me see if I can do that, if it'll let me do that. Screen share. Oh, I'm in Final Cut Pro. That's why it won't do that. Source camera. Screen share. I want to show my whole. I may not be able to do it at the moment. I didn't practice it in advance. But I wanted to show you the Ecamm Live software that I use. Because it takes up, I have a 27-inch diagonal Mac that I use. And right now, pretty much my whole screen is using stuff. I have the Ecamm Live stuff up here, which you're seeing. That's what you're seeing. And I also have the Final Cut Pro up here. Plus, I can see everybody's comments, which is very cool. And let's actually see if there's been any comments that people have questions. Remember, if you have a question, put it all in caps so I can find it. I'm going to start back at the very beginning of the posts and look through here.
Are we frozen, or is that just me seeing everything frozen?
We're not frozen. We're not frozen.
Okay.
We're moving. We're breathing. Okay. Everybody's just saying hi and where they're from, and people from all over the place. Let's see. I'm looking for comments. Jennifer Sanders says, we are also fortunate to have 2 level 3 master hand knitters willing to teach us for free. It's not really for free. You get those ads. You either get ads or you buy YouTube Red. And I think Dolise mentioned something about YouTube Red. She asked a question whether we get anything from YouTube Red. Yes, we get a pittance. We get a pittance from YouTube Red.
Well, they claim that we get more from YouTube Red per viewer than we do from ad revenue, but I have no way of comparing that. But
and the thing is that not very many people use YouTube Red. As far as people who watch my videos, very few of them use YouTube Red. So I don't really get a lot of information about that.
And I think it's probably the demographics. I think if your demographics are like mine, they're our age. And they haven't really, I think it's called YouTube Premium though now, isn't it? It was called YouTube Red for a while, but they don't advertise it. I think it's like $15 a month and you can be ad free. And then they have a few things that videos that are only available that are like specially made or financed for YouTube Premium. I think it's just it's not well known. Right.
And so I really don't see much of it. And I would say my demographics on YouTube, probably I have I have lower number in like 18, 24. Most people I would say are like between 45 and 65. That's a huge percent. And it looks like there's quite a few men, but it's hard to say because I think some women use their husbands' accounts to watch YouTube. So it's really hard to say whether those are men watching. I know I have a lot of men followers, but I don't think that they substantiate the numbers that I see on YouTube, especially people from other countries where they have a family YouTube. They have a family YouTube that they use, and it may be in the man's name, so it looks like a man's watching your videos, but it's really a daughter or wife or sister. Anyway, LR says YouTube Premium is $11.99 a month. Sally Peaches says, what is the best advice you can give a frustrated beginner? I would say practice a little bit every day. Don't practice for long periods of time because that's when you get frustrated. And it takes a while for your brain and your hands to get coordinated. It takes like a few weeks for your brain and hands to get coordinated. And if you work too much, like if you spend all Sunday afternoon, you might be throwing it in the garbage can by the end of Sunday. It's better to Pick it up again. Then when you get frustrated, put it down, pick it up again the next day and work a little bit.
Yeah, I would even say set a timer. Like I learned to spin a few years ago, and I was so excited in one of the classes that I was taking because I was doing really well, and then everything kind of just fell apart. And the teacher said, you know, even though you may not feel like you're tired, your muscles are tired. They're not used to this. And before I took the classes, I was practicing with a spindle, and it was so frustrating because I could not I couldn't create a twisted yarn that was staying together. And so I was setting a timer to make myself do it for 15 minutes and not give up. And then after a few days, I got everything just clicked. And then I was really excited. But it was just sort of that commitment to do about 15 minutes a day at the beginning. And then,
and stay with it, because
yeah,
it will click. It's just like when I first learned how to spin, the same thing. I couldn't get it to draft. I couldn't
yep.
draft, and it would twist up into my hand. And then one day it just started drafting. It's like it's like butter. It just
yeah. It was. I can remember I was sitting in this chair, and I was like, oh my God! And then your body just feels it's right. But like I used to tell my beginning students, you know, because there's a lot to keep track of at the beginning of knitting. You've got to handle the 2 needles, and you have to manage the yarn, and you have to remember the steps of like where do you insert the needle and how do you wrap. There's like those 4 steps of each stitch. And so I just, you know, made sure they focused on, you know, a certain thing. And then once they didn't have to think about those things, they don't have to think about what the 4 steps are, then you can concentrate on creating stitches more efficiently or handling the needles, you know, differently. But you have to not have to think about every single thing that you're doing before you can actually
it's like
progress.
It's like driving a car, riding a bicycle. You know, in the very beginning, it seems impossible, but now you drive your car, you don't even think about it. But you can remember when you first learned how to drive, you had to think about the gas pedal, the brake, the steering wheel, and look around and make sure nobody's going to run into you or you're not going to run into them. Yeah, that's overwhelming. But pretty soon your brain and your body kick in and start working together.
And sometimes you don't think at all, and you are on autopilot, and you end up at the grocery store when you meant to go somewhere.
When I retired from working, I just knew my car was going to still go to work, but it didn't. Yeah, I really did retire in my brain. But it's also somebody on here just a second ago mentioned the yarn. Belinda said, I think the type of yarn you use makes a big difference too. And I agree there, because sometimes when you're first learning how to knit, you do not want to invest any money because you're not sure if you're going to like it. But wool yarn probably is better, and a merino yarn is really nice, and a 4-ply yarn is nice, not a single ply yarn. You know, I didn't know any of these things. You know, years ago, I knew nothing. If I went into a yarn store, the color attracted me, and I've had students come to me with a skein of yarn that's like lace weight, and they think they're going to make, you know, a sweater out of it, and they like the color, but they didn't look to see what size the yarn was. That they didn't know to look, and their eyes weren't picking it up yet. It's training your eyes, and so, you know, I think that wool will give you better results as far as being able to see your stitches. A smooth, plain yarn, if it's fuzzy or has any sort of texture differences in it, it's going to be really hard for you to see what you're doing. And a lot of times, unfortunately, I know yarn store owners that I've seen where I live, when someone comes in and they've never knit before, they'll sell them a pair of needles and a ball of foo-foo yarn. It's what I call foo-foo yarn, you know, because the yarn's so pretty, it's attractive. But really what you need is something totally like this, totally plain.
Yeah.
Totally plain. And so you can see what your needle is doing and how you're making the stitches.
That was always sometimes it was a tough sell on the new students, because I was teaching in a yarn shop. Like your students would have to bring stuff with them, but mine a lot of times would show up for the first class and they wouldn't have any of their materials. And so I'd take them over to the wall of like Cascade 220 or LRA, whatever, the standard worsted weight wool, non-superwash. And I'd say, you can pick anything in these colors.
Right.
Oh, but I really like, navy, and like, you're not going to be able to see it. I know it's boring, but you're just learning to knit. So just pick a color you like. It doesn't have to, but just, well, can I do this? I didn't want him to do anything that was like marled or, and it's going to make them crazy if they do that. So
here's another question. This is from Nancy Creedmoor. She says, yeah, we have a lot of common people. So have either of you had an annoying stalker or overly loving fan? You both have my admiration and appreciation. One of the things that I really do like about YouTube is we have total control over the comments. And I rarely delete, when I've probably deleted maybe 4 or 5 in all the years I've been doing it. That wasn't a spam. I get spam.
Oh, the spam, the hot girls, you can hide those and report them.
I get a couple of those every day. So, or when I put a video out, they're the first ones. They're the first ones every single time. But other than that, like I've had somebody on one of my interviews recently that made an extraordinarily negative comment about the interviewee, and I just deleted it. I love that about YouTube. I have total control over which comments are visible. So I haven't had a stalker, I don't think. I have a lot of people who watch all my videos, and I love them. I love every single one of them. But I don't give out my email address, so I don't really have a problem, with that, people contacting me unnecessarily. What about you, Rox?
No, I don't. I don't put my email address on my YouTube channel. I don't have that, but it's pretty easy to contact me and on Ravelry or through, if you bought one of my patterns, my email address is on there. It's not a big secret what my email address is. But I don't get that. I get the same thing. Some of the very first comments are the spammy or suspect, and so I can hide those. I hide them from my channel, and then I report them because I was afraid if I deleted those and tried to report them that they wouldn't see it. I don't know how that works. So I hide those. And I report them.
Yeah.
But I haven't had. Every once in a while, you'll get somebody who says something really snotty, and like, what is that for? Like, why are you up at 3 o'clock in the morning writing horrible things?
What do you owe them? Nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Well, or just to say something awful, like about whatever I don't know. It's very, very few. Most people are very, very sweet, very nice. I haven't had anybody.
So we actually have one on here right now that I don't have any moderators that caught it. Will R 2007. Well, look at this little stitch class. I love how the poop and yes, house poop and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to, let me
God.
Just somebody, that's all they have to do. They're bored and they don't have anything else to do. So Show and Tell Knitting Podcast said, question, what is left for you to learn in knitting? Are there any techniques that you still haven't tried? There are some techniques I haven't tried, and really mostly what I want to do is perfect what I do know. I don't know. There's some techniques I've tried that I don't like. Like I really don't like twined knitting. I just don't enjoy doing twined knitting. So I don't pursue that. If I enjoyed doing it, I would learn more about it. I just, in the last year, I taught myself how to do the jacquard style double knitting. That was fun. I really enjoyed that.
Well, you do like brioche though too, right?
I love brioche. I love double knitting.
Yeah, and those are things that I'm like, I've tried them. I feel like I should try them to see what they are. And I really love texture knitting. Like that's my thing. I love cables. I love Bavarian twisted stitch patterns. I will do some color work, occasionally. I did a 1920s sweater this year that was intarsia. I hadn't done intarsia in years. And, I didn't hate it. I was always good at intarsia, but it's a lot of ends to weave in. And, I was happy enough to do it. I do stranded color work once in a while, but I really love texture, and that's
Yeah.
what I
I love
gravitate
it all.
to.
I love it all, but I don't like twined knitting. Mostly because it just tangles up your yarn something horrible, and I can't deal with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't mind the actual knitting of the twine knitting. It's what the yarn's doing that I
yeah.
don't care for. And I don't have a purpose for it because it never gets cold where I live. So I would never wear anything that is that wind resistant like twined knitting is. Okay, here's another question. This is Survival Builder 3.14. Survival Builder Pie. Question, when you have a flat pattern that you want to knit in the round, do you just remove the edge stitches? For my first sweater, I made the decision of making an Aran sweater, swatching one now. That's one way to look at it, but you also have to think about stitch patterns because all the rows are going to be right side rows. There aren't going to be any wrong side rows.
I have actually, I don't mind knitting in the round, but I, especially with Aran sweaters, I prefer knitting them flat because I like those rest rows.
Yeah.
And also, you tend to have a lot more stitches, and the knitting is heavier. And so I prefer to knit the pieces separately rather than to knit them in the round.
I really like seaming. Once you learn how to seam, I actually enjoy it. Then it's not just the seaming process, it's preparing for seaming. It's thinking about the seaming before you even knit.
Yep.
For example,
Yep.
some people, you'll see, I get this question a lot in my Facebook group, is how they say my seaming is terrible. Well, you look at what they're trying to seam and they work the stitch pattern right up to the very, from the first stitch to the last stitch. They didn't leave a selvage stitch for seaming. And so there's nowhere to seam. And that makes it really difficult. And then your seam, of course, doesn't look very good either. So it's not really very rewarding. But if you plan for seaming from the beginning, your seams look gorgeous. And it's very rewarding and addicting. I love to seam.
Yeah, for me, there's always that, like, I plan I'm going to do the seams. I know I'm going to like the result better. And I don't mind seaming at all. It's it's not knitting though, it's doing something that's not knitting. But once I get started, I just get in this kind of Zen thing, and I'm usually so happy, like you said, with the way it's coming together. I just get so pleased with the result that I don't mind it as I'm doing it. If it's something like a blanket where you have a lot of seaming, then I will set myself up as like little mini projects. So I'm gonna seam this strip together, I'm gonna seam that strip together, and then I'm gonna do some other thing for a while, because that can take a long time. But I don't mind seaming.
And I like blocking too. I also like blocking sweaters, but I have it down to a pat. And you'll even hear knit along that I'm participating in just a second. Someone asked about how superwash gets out of control. Well, my superwash doesn't get out of control because I knit a gauge swatch and I block it first, so I know what to expect from the fabric. And I don't knit a 4-inch by 4-inch gauge swatch. I knit big. You guys have all seen my gauge swatches. Here's an example. It's dark yarn, but I knit big gauge swatches if I'm going to knit. This is superwash wool. So, and then this one hasn't been blocked. I did a series of 3 on this, was an experiment. But I know what the fabric's going to do when it's wet and when it's blocked. So I'm prepared for that, and I take that into consideration. So when I block my sweater, if it's superwash wool, it doesn't go all out of control. Also, I have videos on how to block your sweater. I plan it out on my blocking board from my schematic. I put pins in the pertinent places so that my sweater piece is going to fit what I planned it to fit. And I mark it out on my blocking board. Then I block my sweater piece. I fold it up very carefully. I block it while it's folded. I bring it out. I get the excess water out. And then I unfold it carefully onto my blocking board to fit exactly in where the pins are. and it comes out perfect every time.
Does your blocking board have a grid on it?
Nope.
Or
Nope. It's just
see, I have like an old quilter's ironing pad that has a grid on it,
yeah.
and so, but with superwash, yeah, you keep everything all together.
Keep it controlled.
Yeah, and then you bring it out. Just I bring it out to the grid lines, and I know where. And then as it dries, it'll
yes.
stay in there.
And you can
Because even regular wool will stretch.
Let me get the other two swatches. Well, let me see. Where's the third one? The third one is misplaced. But so there's this one is unblocked, so you can see it's the curling. This one's been blocked, and I did this like quite a few years ago. This is the blocked one. I made 3 swatches. Left this one unblocked. One of them, when it was wet, I stretched it as far as it would go in every direction and pinned it out, stretched as far as it would go. The other one, I just pinned it to the shape that it wanted to be. Over time, and it took about 3 weeks, the one that was stretched out of shape is exactly the same size as this one now. So this tells you you cannot block a sweater to fit. If the sweater is too small, you cannot block it to bigger. Yes, it'll be bigger when you first take the pins out of it, but in about 3 weeks, it's going to be the size that it wanted to be. And unless you want to reblock it every couple of weeks, so you need to knit the sweater to fit. You need to make appropriate size gauge swatches to start out with and block them. And after I block them, I actually carry them around with me in my purse. I take them all over and I feel them all the time and I play with them. And then I measure the gauge. The fabric has been manipulated. It's had plenty of time to go to the shape that it wants to be, that it's going to stay when it's a sweater. Then I measure the gauge. So I don't make my swatch immediately before I'm going to knit my sweater. And because I'm a knitting addict, I admit it, I'm addicted to knitting, I make my swatch in the middle of the prior project. So I have 2 sweaters going right now. I'll have a swatch going pretty soon for the next one, so that my swatch is made way in advance. I've had plenty of time to carry it around, manipulate it, play with the swatch, and then when I'm ready to start knitting, that's when I take the gauge. My sweaters fit all the time. They all come out the way I want them to. So someone else asked here, would you talk about your editing process in your software? Are you talking about this is Margaret Bramall. Are you asking about the Final Cut Pro software? Or are you talking about software for editing a knitting pattern? I'm assuming you're talking about videos. Roxanne and I both use the same software, and we have 2 different experiences with it. My experience when I got it, I have one Apple store near me. And my town is a good size, but it's not a big town. So you can go down there and get one-on-one attention pretty easily. So I went down and I actually carried my desktop computer down there with me, and I have all my videos and stuff. And this is when I first got this software. And I asked them to show me how to do it. So they didn't have any classes coming up on that topic, how they do the free classes at the Apple store. So they made classes for me. And nobody else went to them, it was just me. So it was one-on-one education, and I went over and over and over. And I would learn something, I would go home and try it, and then I'd come back and learn some more, go home and try it, until I feel pretty comfortable with the software. Roxanne says she went to YouTube videos to learn how to use it, and they're not teaching you about how to make knitting videos.
No, yeah. Well, I go to those kind of tutorials if there's something specific that I'm trying to do, like how do I do this specific thing. I think to learn Final Cut Pro, I don't know even how I just started doing it. My husband, like I said, has some audio and video background, so he used to do like community television back in the late 80s, early 90s before I met him. So he knows a lot about video to begin with. And so he probably helped me a little bit, but I also have a background in IT. I used to, when I worked in the corporate world, was did what's called end user support. So we were doing all of the software evaluations and the training and installing computers and helping people. So to some extent, I have just an affinity for software. And so it's like, okay, I can do just the basic editing. Now, how do I do this effect or that effect? And so I'm a lot more comfortable now. But a lot of it is just the vocabulary. Like, how do I even search for what it is I'm trying to do? Like, I don't have the vocabulary for
Don't know
it.
what to call it yet. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
No, the sun is coming into my window. I'm going to try to.
Okay. Thea
There we go.
Stewart said, "What about steeking?" I like steeking. Once I learned how to do it, and I learned most of what I learned about steeking from Janine Bajus, who has the Joy of Color book, and she does specifically. I was looking for the book; it's right here somewhere, but I don't see it at the moment. She does specifically. All she does is fair isle knitting. I learned how to spit splice the yarns in the steek, so I don't ever have any ends, and I don't have ends hanging out while I'm knitting, so it looks tidy right from the get-go. I learned how to crochet the edges of the steek before I cut it, to crochet and force it before I cut it. So I like steeking, and I'll even steek. I don't have my yellow sweater in here, but my yellow yoke sweater has stranded knitting just in the yoke, and the rest of it's just plain yellow. I steeked the whole front of that, so it's not even stranded knitting. I steeked it, worked just fine, and that is superwash wool in fingering weight. It's Ella Ray, and steeked just fine. It's still holding just fine because I did that crochet reinforcement before I cut it. And once you pick up the stitches along where you're going to pick up for your button band, it automatically forces that fabric to the back like a facing, and it looks fine. It looks fine.
Yeah, I have learned to steek. I've taken classes on it and done it in different ways, but I don't, with the stranded color work that I did prior to the Master Hand Knitting program was usually flat, or it would be in the round, and then they would have you do it flat up here. So I never, for those stranded color work things that I did like when my kids were little, never had to steek. So I've learned to do it, but again, because I love texture so much, it's
not your forte. It's not what you want to do.
Yeah, it's not.
Right.
Yeah, I keep thinking, oh, I should really come up with a stranded color work project to actually officially do it, but I just keep finding other things I want to do. So
right.
There's
so many things to do, and it's like the big ocean out there of knowledge that you can still gain, and the ocean never gets smaller. It's like there's always more to learn. That's what I love about knitting. It's never boring for me. I'm constantly learning something new. Social Survival Builder Pie says, comment, "This is in a very bulky weight yarn, so I'm afraid that my sweater seams will be bulky." The seams will be the same weight as the sweater. And it seems like they would be, but they're going to fit in with the overall weight of the sweater. They won't stand out. If you do them properly, they should be fine.
And you could do, if it's stockinette, you could do a half stitch.
Right, use a half stitch if your edge stitches look nice.
Yeah,
if edge stitches don't look nice, that makes them look worse. So, yeah. Let's see. Anita Mann says, "What do you think of the modification of SSK where the second slip stitch is slipped purlwise? That is so stupid. Oh my God. That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody, but it's, you slip the first stitch as if to knit, slip the second stitch purlwise, put them both back on the left needle and knit them through the back. Why do you have to slip that second stitch?
Yeah, you don't.
You slip the first stitch knitwise, put it back on the left needle, and knit those two stitches through the back. It's like, that's when I first saw somebody do that, I thought, oh my God. They don't get it. They don't understand.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't even like having that bottom stitch twisted.
No, I do the traditional SSK, and
I think we've been trained by the Master Hand Knitting program.
We've been trained by Arinda.
I tried it, and people go, oh, it looks better. Maybe it looks better for them. For me, the twisted stitch raises the
Makes it
surface
bigger.
up a little bit. And for me, I feel like it looks more noticeable.
It's
I
thick.
will use that tech knitter, like a version of a thing that has extra twists in it. If I'm doing in a very specific situations, I will use a different sort of twisted left leaning decrease.
Right.
But
If
it's
it
got
really
to be
kills you,
very
you can just do
specific.
an SSP on the previous row if you're knitting flat in the same spot, just to be one row lower or one row higher. And the SSPs look really, really good compared to SSKs. And
Oh yeah, I agree. I used to
that's the
do that
same
when I
direction.
had
It'll just be
flat.
off by one row, which it will not be noticeable if you're knitting flat. You can't do that if you're knitting in the round.
Yeah.
Sally Peaches said, do you block acrylic yarn? I've never knit anything out of acrylic yarn, so I can't answer
Really?
that.
You've never knit anything acrylic?
Nope.
Um, I have for like my kids when they were little babies and my niece and nephew when they were little babies. I just throw it in the wash. I mean, that's you're supposed to treat it the way you would treat it if you were, you know, going to be washing the finished item. I just throw it in the wash.
So 37 Vega Lira said, I just machine washed my superwash merino sweater and dried it. I used a garment bag to wash and took it out to dry in rest of laundry. Came out great. That's okay. After I do that much work, I'm afraid to throw anything in the. I don't put my socks in the washer and dryer.
Oh, I do. I don't put them in the dryer. I put them in the washer. I probably put them in the dryer once a winter when I feel like they've just gotten more and more stretched out from being superwash and they're just feeling baggy and I'll just, because I feel like they pick up too much lint, in the dryer. I just hang them on a lingerie rack. But yeah, I don't put sweaters in the washer and dryer.
And not after that much work.
Especially since some superwash isn't permanent, it seems like. So I
Joanne Young said, question, does Janine go into detail for steeking? I'd have to look in her book, but I have some really good videos on steeking. If you want to look at my videos, I have my yellow sweater, I made a video of it when I steeked it. So let's see if there's any more question. Carol Brasino, question, after blocking a cotton sweater, have you experienced it stretch? Years ago, I knitted a cotton sweater and over time it became a dress. Cotton is heavy and it will stretch. And it has no recoil like wool does. Wool has a normal recoil, so like elbows don't stretch out, or if you made pants, the knees wouldn't stretch out because the wool has spring to it. It recoils. That's why you can stretch it and it pops right back. Cotton doesn't do that. It's just like, remember jeans? Remember Levi's before they were pre-washed? And you'd buy them a size or two too big because you knew they were going to shrink in the washer and dryer. This might be before Roxanne's time. And then as you wore them, they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you threw them in the washer and dryer and they shrunk down again. That's just the nature of cotton.
So cotton is something that I don't use a lot. You might use more because you live in a hot climate. But I do find that I will put something like that in the dryer until it's just damp because when it's washed, even it wants to grow, it easily stretches out. So I tend to I do put cotton things in the dryer for a little while until they're just damp, and then I can finish letting them dry.
This is, somebody asked about my steeking video, so I'm going to show it here what it looks like. Let me see if I can share this on my screen. Share screen. Where's my screen options? Oh, that's not it. Okay, so this is, whoops, it's not going to work. Okay, it's called Reinforcing and Cutting a Steek. And let me go back to my source. I lost my scenes. Where's my scenes? Uh-oh. I did something. Be patient, please. Scenes. Share screen. Camera. Okay, there we are. Sorry. I'm learning all the time, and this is live, so there you go. So that was the answer to that. It's called, what did I say it was called? I forgot already. But if you just put Suzanne Bryan steeking, you can Google that. It'll pop up with any of the other steeking videos that I have. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about. You know, both Roxanne and I have a lot of videos. And if you're trying to look for something specific, I think the easiest thing is to use your search browser. If you use Google, use that, or DuckDuckGo, or whatever it is you use for your browser. Just type what you're looking for in the browser, put Roxanne, Richardson, and cables, or whatever you're looking for, and any videos that she's tagged with cables will pop up, and you can look and see what it is. Same with me. If you want to learn steeks, you put Suzanne Bryan steeks, and it'll pop right up.
And then I have a lot of playlists too that I try to group things together, like, you know, the sock videos, or even I have tons of sock videos, but I have one that's got all my sock videos, and I have another that's sock heels and sock toes, and then I have increasing and decreasing, or, you know, all of casting on or binding off. And so it kind
I
of
have
depends on the
playlists too,
topic.
but still people have a hard time finding them.
Yeah, it's not, especially when you have that many videos, it's hard. I can't even remember sometimes, like, did I do a video on that?
I know.
I have to go search in my own thing to see if I have one.
So Wolf Graph, you know, people are commenting about me saying that I don't knit with acrylic yarn. I don't knit with acrylic yarn because when I was a little kid, my mom always taught me to wear natural fibers, and that I've spent my whole life doing that because my dad worked in the oil industry, and my mother really believed that we should not wear chemical byproducts next to our skin. And so that is why. It's not because I'm a yarn snob. It's because the way I was raised and what my mother taught me, that I don't buy acrylic clothing either. It's just, you know, like some people are vegetarians and some people are carnivores and some people are omnivores. I like to use natural fibers, and all my clothing is natural fiber. This is cotton. So I'm not down against acrylic. I'm not being that way. But I can't answer questions about acrylic because I don't use it.
Yeah, and for me, these days it's a deliberate choice to use something that has acrylic in it. Thinking about the recipient or and how they're likely to take care of it. But when I learned to knit, I would go to a yarn shop. I'd pick out a pattern that was from a yarn company, and I would use the yarn that they called for. And so if it was and I was knitting a lot of baby items early on because I had a niece and nephew, and then I had little kids, and it was usually acrylic yarn. So that's the majority of things that I have knit that are acrylic have been baby related. But nowadays, like, I have a grandnephew, he got a little grandpa sweater made from hand painted wool because I wanted to do that, but that's not going to be realistic for some people. So
Susan Day has a question for you, Rock. She says, where do you find the early knitting books that you collect?
Oh, I have a lot of vintage books. So I actually talked about this in my Casual Friday video yesterday. A lot of times you can get digitized books, especially if they're from before the 1920s, because then the copyright isn't an issue. So there are a lot of 19th century digitized manuals if you're interested in just reading through those to see what things were like. For 20th century, I use, if I want an actual physical copy, I'll use Abe Books, and I just go in and as a keyword, I'll use knitting or knitting manual. And then you can choose if you want it used. You can do an advanced search and do time frame. Sometimes that's a problem if you're looking around 1900, because I think some people putting knitting books in, they may not put a time frame in. There may be a default of 1900, and so you'll see these really modern books. That's a little frustrating. Then there are people who sell vintage patterns, like they collect them and you can just buy them from their website, or if they have cleared the copyright, they might sell a PDF or even you can get them free sometimes. And then some people do reproduction books. I think it took me a couple of months to kind of figure out how to search for that. Anytime I'm interested in a new topic, I have a hard time, figuring out where do I need to look or how do I need to search for it. It takes a little time to kind of figure that out. Sometimes,
just like anything, there's a learning curve.
Yep. And so like for World War I era, there are museums even around the world that have, especially things knit for soldiers, they'll have those pattern books in their museum, digitized collections. In Australia, they have this whole national periodicals and newspapers have been digitized, and there were tons of knitting patterns in magazines and newspapers. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for, if you want hard copy or not. I was looking for mid-century knitting manuals and not being able to figure out how to find those, like a hard copy. And it was somebody in the All Things Vintage group mentioned some book that had been published in the UK, and I had a title, and then I had an author name, and then I found out those two women published like 8 books in the 1940s. And so once I knew what those were, then I went on to 8 books and I looked to, who was selling those. So that's the thing, is like where's the one piece of information that you need in order to find those. So
just like when just knitting books in general, like most of my knitting library are reference books.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll buy a book that has patterns in it if there's some information in it that is not in any of my reference books. If there's something new or interesting in there, then I'll buy that book even though it's a pattern book. But I also read them, and I read the bibliography in the back. That's where you're going to learn about a lot of other books and sources of knitting information. It's one of the things that I really like about Cast On magazine, and some articles in Interweave Knits, not all of them, is if they list a bibliography for the sources, the resources for their article, I will go and I will look at all those resources, because when you're reading the article, you're just getting that person's interpretation of what they read in the resources. I may gain some different information from the resources. That's one of the ways that I found out that David Zinnicus wrote an article about double knit buttonholes, and it's like, the only way I found out about it was because it was listed as a reference to a reference to a reference when I'm going back and reading those. And I've learned a lot of stuff that way. It's just normal research. It's because my background in the medical field, I'm used to doing research, so I just automatically go to that level of research, and that's how I learn.
Yeah, I am finding these old books really interesting. That's the first thing I do, is I look in their reference section, if there is one in the knitting book, to see how they are saying to do things, and how are they saying to cast on, how are they saying to increase, how are they saying to, if they ever do, they rarely do tell you how to seam. So it's really given me an insight into how the techniques that we use today, how they've kind of evolved, and the reason why some people still have these holdover techniques that they do that they were taught. Like, why were they taught that? Oh, it's because the reason they were taught to slip the first stitch of every row is because they were doing back stitch to seam, and it makes it a lot easier to line things up. They weren't using the same seaming technique that we're using today, but yet that that habit to, you have to slip the first stitch of every row was ingrained in them for generations. So
yeah, and also you have to realize that knitting patterns weren't always written down, or what was written down was minimal compared to what we have now, because people knew how to knit. They knew the basics of garment construction because they started making them when they were very small. So the information that was written down was a different type of information. It might have been the stitch pattern or something different about that garment that they needed to know. So, you know, just even the history of written, not books about knitting, but patterns like came out in magazines and such like that. That's an interesting topic too, you know, going back and seeing how pattern writing evolved. This is 37 Vega Lira. She says, question for Roxanne, are there Art Deco type knitting patterns? I love the Art Deco style.
Well, I think things from the 1920s, I don't know how you would define Art Deco clothing, but the 1920s has some really interesting patterns. And I love the 1920s fashion. The problem is that, like many vintage or all vintage patterns before about 1950, they were in one size, and the fashion was to have a boyish figure, so they were using shapewear to smash themselves down, and that the look isn't going to be the same in a lot of cases. Those really long, straight silhouettes with no boobs and no hips is a little hard to pull, off now.
That Chanel better with the bow on the front, the intarsia bow. I would say that was Art Deco.
Was that Elsa Schiaparelli?
No, the Chanel sweater.
I didn't think it was Chanel. I thought it was Schiaparelli or Elsa.
Let me see. I have my Richardson book. I think it's in here because it was in the 1920s.
Yeah, well, she was using some machine knit. She was using wool jersey during World War I because she couldn't get woven fabrics because they were being used for soldiers' uniforms. So she kind of brought sweaters into the more just regular casual wear instead of being athletic garments. But I thought that was Elsa something or other. So are you talking about the one where they used that technique where they were trapping the black and white all the way around? Okay, but is that Chanel?
Yes, Gabrielle Chanel.
Why did I think that was?
That's intarsia. It's intarsia.
Oh, well, I think it's that you can see. I think it's that thing. Who is it? Schoolhouse Press.
Well, it's Gabriella Chanel, and Elsa Schiaparelli.
That's the name that I was trying to.
It's Chanel that designed the sweater.
Okay.
You know, it says it's Schiaparelli's with the white collar. And that was in 1927.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting sort of geometric shapes and things. There are some UK websites that have some patterns for those. So the 20s just get trickier because of copyright laws. But the All Things Vintage group on Ravelry is a good resource for where can I find patterns for this decade. And I think Antique Pattern Library, you can look at things by decade. And and there are other vintage websites too where you can look at things by decade and you can get styles. But the 1920s is when the sweaters got really interesting and the construction methods got a lot more sophisticated in some cases as well.
When the Fair Isle became popular too, it's around that time. And yokes.
Yep.
Yep.
But they had a lot of these dressmaker techniques where they were doing armhole shaping differently in the front than the back. I mean, some really like much more sophisticated even than we would tend to do today.
Anne says, and I think we're going to call it quits here shortly because we've been on here for an hour and a half already. Okay. Anne says, question, what are the differences between mattress stitch and back stitch seams? It's two completely different ways.
Yeah.
Mattress stitch, the yarn is going like this in the end. Back stitch, it's going like this. You use a lot more yarn in the seam to do a back stitch than you do doing a mattress stitch.
Yeah, back stitch, it's the same back stitch that you would use in regular sewing, like if you had woven fabric. So they were using the same techniques for seaming that they used regardless of the type of fabric back then.
And mattress stitch literally goes through the loops of one stitch, then the next, from side to side. So it's snaking up, and it actually is one long straight strand if you pull it tight.
And you do it from the right side of the work with the two pieces lying edge to edge flat, where back stitch you have the right sides facing, and they're
just like sewing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna call it quits. If you are one of my subscribers, feel free to go over to Roxanne's channel and her YouTube channel and subscribe. And if you're one of her subscribers who haven't subscribed to my channel, come on over and subscribe to my channel. I think you get good information from both of us. And we'll do this again sometime. So have a good afternoon. Good afternoon and happy knitting.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
I'll bring it to an end.
Bye, everyone.